that was the first day that we like rode in and saw wild horses. And the very first time that I saw them, I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Like seeing them from a car is one thing, but like riding horses near them, I was like, it was like a really special moment. It just made it feel really real.
That's Katherine and Caroline of the film Women in the Wilderness. I'm Kara Duffy, and this is the Powerful Ladies Podcast. Welcome to the Powerful Ladies Podcast.
Thank you.
Let's dive right in and tell everyone who you are, where you are in the world, and what you're up to.
I can go first. I'm Caroline. I'm living in Colorado now. We have a little ranch with 5 acres, and we've got 2 horses, and one of them is a little Mustang, actually, from the reservation out here. We're by a lot of Ute land, so yeah.
Very cool.
I'm Katherine. I'm living in southern Wyoming.
I love it. And you guys are here today to talk about Women in the Wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
Let's tell everybody what that is. What is Women in the Wilderness and how did it start?
I can jump in. So it started in 2018. I was working at the same ranch that I'm working at now, where Caroline and I met, and Louisa, who's not on the call, but she's the third woman on this project. She came up with this idea to do an all-female horsepacking trip to learn about one just to do a horsepacking trip because why not? But also to learn about wild horses and kind of how they're living on the landscape and learn more about them because there's a lot of controversy around them. So we sort of just jumped into this project and just didn't really know where to start and decided we wanted to film the whole thing too to make a documentary. So we sort of just jumped in and have been working on it ever since. So we did the ride. We did a 30-day ride through Wyoming in October of 2021 and recorded the whole thing. We interviewed different people along the way to talk about kind of the wild horse problem and learn from different people. And so now our documentary is in post-production. So we're getting closer and closer to having a finished product. But that's kind of a summary of the project.
Well, I do think it's important to share about the Wild Horse Challenge. Most people think that there's probably not enough wild horses, especially in the U.S. So what is the reality of what's going on and why is it an issue?
Well, the reality of it is it varies, of course. So the way that it works is managed by the Bureau of Land Management, the BLM, and they break it down into different HMAs, which is herd management areas. And of course, it varies from HMA to HMA, but in many of them, there is actually a large overpopulation problem. And this kind of comes from the fact that the horse, it's very contentious whether the horse is native or not native to Northern America. So I won't even touch on that, but they've lost their natural predator, which is the mountain lion. And that's the only thing that would hunt them. And so now they're just living out there unchecked and multiplying, at this speed that the land can't keep up to support them. And like natural selection is not doing anything to cut that down at all. And so what the government has been charged with the task of is managing those population numbers. And so the way that they do that now is they will go out there with the majority of the ways they do that is they go out there with a helicopter and they'll round up these herds. It's how they can cover the large areas of land, and they'll do counts and they'll push the excess number off the land into these like adoption holding facilities. And so when that started happening in 1971, the belief and the hope was that these excess horses that are deemed to be too much of a strain on the land would be adopted by horse lovers. And the idea sounds really great. And the reality is that there are just not enough adopters for these horses. And so the current situation is we are stuck in a place where there is a surplus of horses on these lands, which are also shared with cattle, because they do have pre-existing cattle allotments for the ranchers out there. Those are existing before the 1971 Wild Horse and Burro Act. So those have to be honored. There's also elk, deer, all the other wildlife, not to mention just the vegetation itself. And so the government has to manage, how much can this land support? And so now you've got too many horses on this land. You've got a ton of horses stuck in these holding facilities, which is, of course, not the goal and not what people want to see. And then you're left with, well, what do you do from there? Mm-hmm. So that's, I don't know, hopefully that made sense, a good summary of what's going on right now.
Well, and there's so many people who love horses and don't even know this is happening. Right. And I imagine like every little girl right now is like, I'll take a horse, like just send it over.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where we were. We were like, oh my gosh, like what's going on? And how are we such big horse girls? And we didn't know all of this was. So it was really interesting. As Katherine said, it was like the more we learned, we're like, oh my gosh, we have to also share what we're learning. And so that was a big part of it, is we're not coming with this documentary with the goal of like, okay, we want you to leave thinking this about, we just want you to leave being educated so that you can figure out how you think. And it's really our journey of discovering all this information as doing this ride with the horses that are Mustangs, which is really cool.
I remember the first time I saw wild horses, I was doing a road trip through Mongolia.
Oh my gosh.
To see wild horses just doing their things was incredible and so magical. I've never had that experience in the US because I'm assuming they're staying away from most places that I'm frequenting. Have you experienced wild horses without looking for them in the US?
The first time that I experienced wild horses was actually like right before our trip when we had to set up water caches because we were riding through the desert. And so when we were driving through the desert, we were seeing the horses that we were, probably going to encounter on the trip. And that was the first time that I had ever seen them. I don't personally live in a place where we have wild horses, but there's definitely a lot across the West. And like if you lived in, other states like Nevada or like Colorado, you can kind of just run into them. Like they are overpopulated in some areas, and you're just driving along the highway and, there's a wild horse next to you.
That's on our drive from where we live in Colorado to where my family lives in California. We go through this huge reservation area and you'll just be driving along, look out and there's horses out there. And so that's really cool now. And that's a whole nother thing of how reservation horses are managed because they're managed on native land. So it's separate from the BLM, but it's not something that I saw before living out here regularly. And now it's there's a horse. Oh, there's some horses. Yeah.
When did you guys first fall in love with horses?
I was 9 years old when I started riding. I just started riding at a summer camp and then just never left that barn, basically.
And you're originally from Vermont, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Mm-hmm.
How did you end up in Wyoming?
When I was in college, I knew that I really wanted to work on a guest ranch. I had heard, one of my classmates had worked on a ranch, and I just decided that's what I needed to do. And so I found this ranch through my professor at University of Vermont. She had also worked out here and came out here for a summer, and I have not left.
Love that. How about you, Caroline? When did you first fall in love with horses?
I just was told that as soon as I could talk, I was asking my parents for a horse, and they're not horse people. So they were like, where are you going to put this horse? Live in an apartment in LA. And I was like, put it on the balcony. They let me start doing horse riding lessons when I was 5. And I did like a couple different disciplines, but mostly I did this like military riding called drill team riding. And I did that from 11 to 18. And then, found my way out to Wyoming and got more involved in like cowboy stuff. And just really you don't stop once you start.
It is, it's like many things that once you fall in love with something so specific, you just fall into the black hole and you're like, bye everyone, I'm not going to come out.
Yes. Horse girl to the bone,
Yeah. How, for someone who's never encountered a horse, which might sound crazy to you guys, but for someone who hasn't, how would you explain the feeling between you and the horse and what you experience in those shared moments?
I was just thinking of that quote that that horses are the mirror to the soul, which is like kind of corny, but it's like so true that kind of whatever you're experiencing, the horse will sort of mirror back to you. And I feel like every time I get on the horse, it's like if I'm having a bad day, all of a sudden my horse is having a bad day too. Or like if we can't communicate well, it's probably because I'm not communicating well. they're just really, really intuitive animals. And I think, the fact that, we love cats and dogs and they live in our house with us, but it's different to be like having a horse that's like your partner when you're riding and working together. It's just a totally different relationship, I think, than other pets, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you're tuned into that, it can be very humbling, because you can be like having such a frustrating day. And then your horse is like, all right, well, so I'm frustrated with you too. And you're just like, oh my, I got to calm myself down. Or if you're scared or nervous, like there was one part on our ride that we did that was genuinely one of the scariest trails I've ever been on. And at times where like the horses were slipping, and then we're like talking like super narrow path and like huge cliff sides either side. And we had like one horse had a big fall. And I was so shaken up. I was like, I have to walk, because if I get on my horse is going to get nervous and they're not going to trust me. And so you have to be aware of how you guys are feeding off each other. So I had to calm myself down and I'd walk, felt better, got back on, everything was okay. But like, it's just crazy. It's very humbling.
Yeah.
Very special.
A lot of people have something that they find interesting or they're passionate about, and they take actions, but their thought isn't, we should film this and make this a documentary. How did you guys make that connection or that leap? Like, were you filmmakers before? Did you have filmmaker friends? How did it go from let's do this cool 30-day ride to let's make a documentary?
I think it honestly was, a lot of it was just us being like, we feel like this is so important. We just want to share all of this with the world, because that's the only way we can make a difference. It doesn't matter if I know a ton about Mustangs if nobody else knows. And so it was partly that. And then partly also, I think a big part for me was, I grew up, you watch documentaries, it's always like dudes doing cool stuff, which is great. Dudes can do really cool stuff, but girls are out there doing cool stuff all the time. And so for me, I'm like, it'd be really cool to be like an inspiration for little boys and girls to see that you can go out there and do anything you want to do. And it doesn't mean that we're special, because like Lou is off, she's guiding on the river in Idaho right now. She's our partner. She's doing that with like a bunch of women do that stuff all the time. But I think the thing is, if you don't see it, you don't know about it unless you're in it. So it was the education aspect of the Mustangs and wanting to share, with the public what's going on. And then also like maybe inspire some girls and boys to get out there and do stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I also think like sharing about the wild horse problem without sort of making it biased. Like there's so much information about what's going on with wild horses, but it's always like almost everything you read is swayed one way or another. It's like there's too many horses out there. There's other sides that say like that the BLM is sort of limiting how many horses can be out there, and there's actually not an overpopulation. So I think part of it too, I feel like we all have like different reasons for doing it. And I feel like part of it was that we just wanted to like share this information and teach people about it without like Caroline said, like we didn't want them to walk away feeling like this is the answer. It was more, you can make your own decision now that you have all the information, or as much as information as we can provide in a 2-hour documentary.
Yeah. And did you guys have documentary friends, or did you just go out and start finding people who you're like, they might be crazy as we are, and say yes?
Yeah, it was really like that. So I was living in LA at the time, and it just like the way the whole thing started was like, anytime we would be like, oh my God, how are we going to do this? Somebody would just kind of come into our lives and be like, oh, I can help you with that. Oh, I want to do that. And so we had at the beginning a couple of really great guys that were our friends that were like filmmakers, and they helped us make our pitch video. And as the pitch video kind of gained traction, I had a friend who was an artist who knew somebody who knew somebody. And then we found our producer, and she was like, oh yeah, I want to produce this because I have a daughter and blah, blah, blah. And so like she pulled in other people, and like, it just like snowballed. It kind of felt out of our hands. And we feel very lucky to have met everybody that we did, because it's just been amazing to work with these people.
Well, and the people who are supporting your film are not like random filmmakers. Like your producer has done so much incredible work.
Right.
She really has.
She won Best Music Video at the Grammys in 2019.
Yeah.
For This Is America, right? Like this is not, and done all the other music videos and documentary work that she's done. Like Sam French people know, and like his story is crazy. Like everyone who's a part of this, it's not like some random film student was like, I'll come along for a ride. Like, no, you got very serious, legit people to come on board. And I love that it just happened, because for me, that's such a sign that this is what you were supposed to do.
Yeah, that's kind of exactly what it felt like, because we really didn't know. I mean, it felt like every step of the way we were like, how are we going to plan this? How are we going to find horses? How are we going to pack food? How are we going to produce it? And it really did feel like it was sort of just meant to work. And I also think we sort of just believed in it so much too. Like at no point were we like, we can't do this anymore, we have to give up. Like at every step we were like, we'll just find a way. And it just worked. And I think some of it is a testament to just getting really lucky. And I think it just felt like it was meant to be. And some of it was just like not giving up on the thing and just pressing forward even when it was hard.
Yeah, 100%.
When you guys are living in a place that has been a little controversial, all these states that we're talking about, in accepting outsiders, and especially accepting outsiders into cowboy culture, what have you experienced coming from, the alleged liberal coasts?
I know.
And coming into traditional cowboy territory.
You want to take it? You've been in Wyoming for a while.
It's hard because I feel like I'm still not like cowboy because I work on a guest ranch. It feels like it's like pretend cowboy. It was I don't know. I personally really like the culture out here. Like I think it's really similar to Vermont, that Vermont can be really, really left wing, but I also feel like there's a lot of people that are really in the middle too and are just looking for like someone who makes sense. And I feel like Wyoming is very that way too. They're not just like, I mean, you'll meet some people who are just completely staunchly right, but I feel like a lot of the culture in Wyoming is also very like, we just want someone like who makes sense and does what's best for all of us in the community. And I think that's really like what Wyoming is, and what a lot of cowboy culture is just like looking out for your neighbor and like stepping in when they need help, because there's so few people out here. And if you're stuck out in the middle of nowhere, like you need your neighbor to help you sometimes in like actual life-saving circumstances. So I think there is just like this really great community culture here. And it does take some, I don't know, I feel like you sort of have to prove yourself a little bit here, like that you are going to come through for your community, that you are pretty tough. Like Wyoming is in a lot of places like a hard place to live, just environment wise. But I think if you sort of like prove yourself and like stick it out, you can get your way into the community, but it takes time. Like it doesn't just happen overnight.
Yeah. But it's interesting that you asked that, because I think if you ask the three of us, like what some of our favorite moments were from this whole trip, is genuinely the people that we met. And I think, I don't know, maybe it's just the stereotype. There is, of course, some truth to it, but like, I don't know. I never felt, you get teased maybe a little bit. I'm thinking of like some moments where we got teased as being all girls, but at the same time, we did it, and nobody's going to disrespect us for that. And most of the people we met were like the most kind-hearted, genuine people. And as long as you're an honest, like especially hardworking person, you're going to be, you don't have to bring up, stuff that's super divisive. Everyone just wants to support each other and be a community. And I'm thinking of like Mary Hay, who was like, she was a rancher that took us into her home, supported us, and she was talking about her life. And she's a lifelong cattle rancher out in the Red Desert of Wyoming. So it's not that it's only a boys club. There's so many out there working super hard. At Big Creek, her name is escaping me right now.
Is it Rebecca? Or are you thinking of Susie?
Susie Dunning, the Dunning. So like Susie, like we let us like put our horses in her arena for the night because we were like having a rough night, and she's out there working cattle and stuff. And there's just all these tough women out there that, again, I think it's just this perception of like, oh, Wyoming is cowboy men. And it's a ton of cowgirls out there, a ton of women doing so.
Yeah. And I think the female culture in Wyoming is so cool, because you're out here to work on a ranch or whatever you're doing in Wyoming. And it really doesn't matter if you're male or female, as long as you can like get the job done. So there's really not like a lot of that bias of like, oh, you're a woman, you can't keep up with this. It's really pretty much like, if you can keep up, then that's all we need.
Doesn't matter who you are, what you are. If you can do the job, if you can do what you need to do, it's cool. which is refreshing, honestly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
2 years ago at Mountain Film, I got to see the movie Cowboys and Poets. Have you guys heard about this film?
Mm-mm.
It's an incredible documentary where every year in Elko, Nevada, they have the Cowboy Poetry Festival. And so all these cowboys from around the US and maybe even internationally come and read poetry and sing songs they wrote. And it's this really soft experience for a lot of these like very tough cowboys and cowgirls. And it was really interesting because there's a whole section about how one of the leaders kind of in this organization was talking to other ranch owners and just saying like, we have to start voting for climate policies because we can see it on our land. And it was like really interesting to see this tension between loyalty for potentially voting more Republican, and typically the climate and the environment ends up on the left side. And they were like, no, like we're living right in the middle of these two spaces. And like, we have to start looking, especially at a local level, how we can be voting to save our ranches and our lifestyle and all these animals and land that we care about. How are you guys seeing the conjunction of resources and ranchers coming together in your daily life and also through this film?
Yeah, I think ranchers are, I don't think this is the general consensus outside of the West, but in the West, like ranchers are conservationists. Like they are the number one stewards of the land. Like they are the ones working the land. They're the ones taking care of it. And like, if they don't, they don't have a ranch anymore. Like if you don't know how to run water or like flood irrigate or like not overgraze your pastures, you're out of business. So these people are the stewards of the land, and they are taking care of it so well. But I think sometimes they get a bad rap because cattle have suddenly become, bad for the environment. But I never, I mean, I love like poor grazing practices. I don't see, ranchers like having a poor relationship with the land. I actually see them having the best relationship with the land than anyone else.
I remember, I think it was maybe the Oldhams who brought it up. They said if we don't take care of the land, we don't have a livelihood. And I thought of it that way before because, like I said, I'm from California. I hadn't been out there ranching, and I was, kind of shocked. I was like, you are completely right. I never thought of that before. And I think that's something that doesn't cross people's mind.
Do you guys think that this is the first of many films that you want to make, sharing about your lives and horses and all the adventures you can go on?
I feel like I get this question a lot, and I'm always like, that was a lot of work. It's taken so long and it's still not out. I like maybe if it came together to do another one, but I don't know. It's a lot of work to do.
We joke, we're like, I'll talk to Lou sometimes or Catherine. We're like, we should do this again, but like, no film crew. Just like let us go out there and like be wild. Because it was such a cool experience, and I'm really hopeful that the film does the things we hope that it does. But it's sometimes they'd be like, okay, that was cool, but actually, can you ride back and just do it one more time? And we'd be like, but we have to get to camp. We got to set up, like, we got like horses take care. That whole aspect of it is something that like we could have never prepared for because we're not film people. When it came down to it, on the days that we were like doing a lot of filming, we would get to our campsite so late, like setting up in the pitch black. And so totally worth it. Hope that it does what it does. If somebody's like, hey, we'll pay you guys to go ride here and do that, 100%, I would do it. But yeah, we don't have the money to do another one either.
Yeah, I feel like that's the biggest thing. It's just the money and like the amount of fundraising that it took. And fundraising is like no joke. I had no idea. Like people always talk about how challenging it is, but I mean, it is like a full-time job when you're fundraising. So that was almost one of the hardest parts of the whole thing. And I don't know if I'm up for it again, maybe, but
crazy because like, I think it's like a humbling experience because you're getting all these donations from people and you're like, oh my God, I don't want to let them down. This is like such a big responsibility to have all of this supporting us on our crazy. It's like, so we had some really successful crowdfunding and fundraising campaigns. And like, at the end of the day, we are still like, things are just so expensive to make on documentaries. Like I would have never thought that you have to color a film. I don't think about that. I didn't make a film before, like, licensing for music and matching the sound up because they take sound from different places and all these things that go into that you just don't. I didn't think about it.
There's so many steps.
Yeah. So it's a lot.
If you had to pick one moment when you were out on the ride that felt like magic, what would that moment be?
I think we always say the same one, that day that we had free time and we got to go like gallop the horses down the road.
That was really up there. It was so much fun. Yeah. I was also thinking of the time when we were riding with John, and this was the day that John, I can never say his last name right, but I love him so much. John Mainzinski. We interviewed Red Desert, and like genuinely one of my favorite humans. He was escorting us to the entrance of the Red Desert. And as we finally dropped down into the Red Desert, it was like, it had been the longest day of like super windy riding. We're all like riding with our heads down, staring at like the feet of the horses because you can't talk. It's too loud, freezing cold, miserable, nothing around, nothing to look at. Suddenly you just like drop down into these like the honeycomb buttes of the Red Desert, and like, oh, it's just insane. The sun was like shooting sunbeam. I think there's like a clip where I'm talking about it, and
yeah, there is.
Like, that like surfer guy. But, like, that was up there for sure.
Yeah. I think that day was like really special because that was the first day that we like rode in and saw wild horses. And the very first time that I saw them, I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Like seeing them from a car is one thing, but like riding horses near them, I was like, it was like a really special moment. It just made it feel really real. And then I immediately was like terrified because I was like, we have 9 horses. Like, how are they going to react to these wild ones? But right. it was such a cool moment for the first time to like see them out in the wild.
Yeah. How did they react to each other?
We got to, I think, well, there are many instances of interaction, and there's some things that we can't speak about because, element of for the film. But like most of the time when we were riding through, our horses did such a good job. And I think we talk about this a lot is I think by that time, our little 9 group of horses had become a herd with each other and with us. And they were like, they're also all gelding, so they don't have those raging hormones. But stallions would come up to see who we were, see if we had mares. We had stallions coming up into our string to try and we had to chase them off. We had, big group of 40 horses crossing behind us, running back and forth. We're terrified, worried because we don't know these horses super well of our own. But I think that they had bonded with each other. They were like, it's okay. Like, we have our herd. Why would we run off? So luckily they were pretty unbothered, which is, we didn't know. And we got very lucky that they're like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think in retrospect too, it was really smart of us to bring horses that had been previously wild. I didn't really think about that before the trip, but they had lived out there and had lived in an environment where they had seen other wild horses running by them and, had lived that already. And so I think they were not as fazed as if we had brought other horses out there, I think it would have been a very different scenario, but they were mostly unfazed by other horses.
Yeah. I have so many questions now about how wild horses act and how many herds they are, and do they get along or do they fight with each other? Next episode, we have to bring in a biologist who just knows horses, I think.
Because we're no experts for sure. We just saw what we saw, but it is crazy. They have crazy social dynamics. Horses are incredibly social creatures. And my first experience with that was working at the ranch where Catherine's at, where they have 120 horses, and you're like, oh my gosh, they're working out their hierarchy. And even though it's they're all domesticated, they have this strong social structure. And so same with wild horses. Very, very cool.
It's like same as if you had a dog sanctuary, right? When there's all those, they still all have their personalities and their relationships. It makes me think about the separating the wild horses from their wild herd to get them adopted. It makes me feel like the whales in SeaWorld. Do you know anything about the psychological impact when they're removed from the herd, or are they removed in a group where they're just not by themselves?
So I think this is a big concern that people have, and they get really worried, and rightly so, because we have a tendency to project our feelings onto animals. Something we talked about a lot too is like, oh man, like, are we really cruel for making our horses, making our horses be out here with packs on them and saddles and bridles and all that? Being like, haha, you losers. But it's like, of course they bond really strongly to their herd, but it's the same. Have a puppy, you take that puppy from its mother at some point, and the puppy's okay. They re-bond with it. And so it's the same with the horses. Of course, there's a bond there that's going to be broken unless you take the whole herd off, which they'll take the groups off together, but then they separate them. The stallions go separately, the mares go separately. And if the mare has a foal, they keep the mare with like the nursing foal. But if the foal is weaned, they separate those. And so it might sound cruel until you think about, okay, well, if my dog has puppies, I can't keep 8 puppies. I have to separate them.
Unfortunately, yeah.
As much as they love to. And they're okay. They make bonds, and they are all right. All the Mustangs that we had come off of the land, and they were fine. And even they came from their own herds. We rented some our horses, and they came from herds, and they were fine. So I think people don't give them enough credit, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think horses are like incredibly adaptable animals too. Like if you think of all the things that we ask them to do, like going on, from like trail rides to like, pulling farm equipment to like, jumping over jumps in the Olympics, like there's so many different things that they can do and handle. And like, I mean, even just the horses that we leased on a regular basis are being leased out to different people every summer or every like few weeks. And they're just really adaptable animals too.
Well, it makes me think of, border collies or herding dogs, and like they want work. They want to be participating and doing things. They're smart enough where they want the stimulation and like, give me something to do. Because
when we talked, when we interviewed the Oldhams, and that was a family that we spoke to in Lander, Wyoming, and they're a native family that are cattle ranchers, but they also run a wild horse sanctuary where what happens is if there are horses that get returned to the BLM number of times, or they're just too unmanageable, they're deemed unadoptable, and those horses then have a choice to either be in the holding pen for the rest of their life, or they have government sponsored holding facilities called like sanctuaries. So it's essentially just a big pasture where they can run around. And on the surface you're like, oh, that's great, they get to go run around. But then you're like, okay, well, we saw these horses as part of our interview, and it's beautiful to watch them running circles in this pasture. And then you realize they're just running circles in this big pasture for the rest of their life. And is that a life? Because they do love to have a job, and they do want to have like genuinely a purpose. And I don't know, you're saving them from one fate, but at the end of the day, I don't know. It's a really tough, very tough thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard. When we, kind of look at what's next for this film, what do you guys need to finish it, bring it to life? Like, what are the next steps, and how can people help?
We're getting really close on the editing process. So we've finished what's called the rough cut. So basically we've like picked out all of the scenes that will be in the movie. And right now it's currently getting colorized. And then the next step will be adding in like graphics and titles, and then music. So our producer Danielle is trying to finagle some music for us and make that work. It's just, music can be one of the more expensive things, so that's just a little challenging right now. But it sounds like it is progressing really well, and we're getting closer and closer. People can always help by donating. Like any donations that we get will just go straight to the editing process and just help us like get through the music and pay for it, or even, just like make a better film. So people can always donate, and we have a website and a link on there to donate.
And what's that website for everyone listening?
It's womeninthewildernessfilm.com.
Perfect.
Yeah. And just sharing it, like at this point, just getting the word out, getting people excited, because the more people that know about it and want it to get out, the more hype that we have and more people we can reach. And yeah.
All right. I love it. So we ask a couple of questions for everyone on the podcast. Are you guys ready for some rapid fire questions?
Sure.
When you hear the words powerful and ladies, how do you define them? And do their definitions change when they're put next to each other?
It's so like the first thing I was like pantsuit. But like that's so also just like I don't know, like I know so many genuinely powerful ladies. So like it's like it's a given. Ladies are powerful people, beings.
I just think of women who get shit done. I think of powerful ladies.
How have powerful women changed your life or your trajectory or helped you along the way?
Well, two of them went on this crazy trip with me and filmed a documentary. So they definitely changed my trajectory. I never thought I'd be in a documentary.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, 100%. And like Danielle is at the helm of the whole production stuff, and she's an incredibly powerful woman. She has started her own production company. And as you said, she's really like got a lot of things to show for herself. And also I'm thinking of like Lynn, she was our head wrangler when we first worked at the ranch. And she was so inspiring. She was like maybe 5 feet tall, laying down rhinestones every day, super badass, handle any, but also could handle any, person that came into the barn that had complaints. She was like, just so, I don't know, so badass. She's very inspiring.
If you put yourself on the powerful lady scale, 0 being average everyday human and 10 being the most powerful lady you can imagine, where would you put yourself today and on an average day?
I don't know where I put myself.
I mean, head rank guest ranch is pretty.
Yeah, I like working with my staff every day and helping them like grow and learn and being like a leader to them. So I feel that makes me feel powerful.
Yeah.
And working with horses because they're giant animals, and it's crazy when you're just working with this gigantic prey animal and like, you guys are on the same page. That just, there's nothing like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a powerful feeling.
Mm-hmm.
This is a powerful community, right? Of all these people who, honestly, like there's so much crossover values. Like you guys were talking about before, like I really believe most people are good people and they want to make an impact and make a difference and be of value. So we've been asking everyone who's been coming on, what do you need? What's on your to-do list, your manifest list? How can we help? What do you want to ask this community to help you with or support you with, whether it's related to the film or totally different?
Good question too. I mean, really at this point, I'm just like, I am very itching to get this out there. I do really want to, because I feel that this is, for me, that's like the culmination of it's been like so long that we've been working on this. And I just want it out so bad because it's hard to be sitting on all this stuff and not be able to share it. And I really want to share it with people.
Yeah, I agree. I just want it out in the world so everyone can see it, and we don't have to keep all these secrets about our trip. But
I know, so hard. Oh,
I know.
So for everyone who wants to support you, follow you, donate to you, they can find you on Instagram. And is it the same as your website? Everything's the same?
There's just underscore, so it's women _in_ but if you search it, you'll find us. And yeah, I mean, if people want to like send us a message or like make a comment, like we read all of them. We all share the same account. So it's like, we all respond back and it just like keeps us going. I know we don't have a lot of like hands-on work that the 3 of us are doing at the moment because it's in our producer's hands, but I don't know, to like keep the spark alive and keep the motivation going. It really to hear when people comment or share. It's like, it's us 3. It's not like some corporation. We are like, somebody message us, It's a big deal.
I love that. Well, thank you guys so much for being a guest to Powerful Ladies and sharing your story today. I love documentaries. I sponsor and every year go to Mountain Film Festival. And so this type of storytelling is really my favorite. I'm excited to see it. I want to know all the secrets you can't tell us now. But just, thank you so much for what you're doing and just being an example of how badass women can be, and especially when it's women and horses combined.
Very happy to keep us on.
All the links to connect with Women in the Wilderness Film are in our show notes at thepowerfulladies.com. Please subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening, and come join us on Instagram at Powerful Ladies. If you're looking to connect directly with me, visit karaduffy.com or Kara_Duffy on Instagram. I'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Until then, I hope you're taking on being powerful in your life. Go be awesome and up to something you love.